Thank you very much. And I would like to thank Professor Zielonka very much indeed for writing actually a fine piece for Open Democracy on the Brexit referendum. And he calls this piece Brexit Referendum Folly. And in it, he bemoans the absence in today's Europe of, quote, some meaningful channels of pan-European public deliberation. This is the huge absence in our midst, that's clear. So I'm very, very glad that we have a small version, perfectly formed, of pan-European public deliberation here today. And my job as editor, I'm editor of Open Democracy, but my job as chair today is to make sure that we have discussion, full discussion, and as many of you can come in after our two speakers have spoken as possible. So I'm going to be completely draconian about the timing. I hope that's okay with everybody. And I'm going to kick off by introducing our two speakers on a very important subject. Does the left have a future in Poland? I sometimes feel terribly sorry for lefts. They have a hard enough time getting going, and then no sooner have they got going, but they seem to be expected to take on single-handedly the job of saving the European Union itself. So it's with that, such heroic thoughts in my mind, that I would like to introduce you first to our discussant. Our discussant, Jacek Żakowski, is a writer, a journalist, and a teacher. He graduated from the Department of Journalism and Political Science at the University of Warsaw. He's one of the founders of Gazeta Wyborcza, in which he is now a commentator. He was the first president of the Polish Information Agency, and he currently works for Polityka as a journalist and commentator. He's the head of the Department of Journalism at Collegium Civitas in Warsaw, and therefore a much valued colleague for me as a journalist. He is the author of numerous television programs, radio programs, and books, and in 1997 was the first winner of the Grand Press Award for Polish Journalist of the Year. So, Jacek will have a lot to say, I think, about our main speaker of the afternoon, and this is Adrian Zandberg. Adrian Zandberg is a Polish historian and a computer programmer, a Doctor of Humanities, and a left-wing politician, member of the board of Partia Razem, the Together Party. He was placed on the first place of Razem's Warsaw candidate list in the same elections in October 2015, and received personally, in a matter of months and weeks, 49,711 votes. This is what I know about him, and before, that is, I went to have a look at Wikipedia. I apologise to you who are real scholars for this particular trait, but I'm afraid we journalists do take that recourse occasionally. And there I discovered that in this extraordinary vote, the position that he'd taken in the television debate before the parliamentary elections, he was representing the smallest of the 8 parties in this debate, and amongst various other positions, he was the only one of the 8 panellists who pleaded for an unconditional acceptance of Syrian war refugees in Poland. So I think this is a very interesting stance because it made him extremely popular. The media immediately took this up, and here we have an interesting connection between our two speakers, since we all know that it's the media, actually, in the end, who makes left parties, charismatic leaders, goodness knows what. We might, in fact, have the makings of a charismatic populist leader in our midst, or something completely different. So let us now give Adrian the chance to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation here. Well, the question posed does not give me a chance to give any other answer than affirmative, of course. Being a member of an executive board of a left-wing party in Poland, I must be, at least officially, quite sure that we are destined to win. But to be honest, the starting point where Razem is at the moment is quite low. In public debates after the election, many journalists asked the question, what actually happens with Polish political scene that the left disappeared? But our analysis and our position on this question is rather different. We believe that there is actually no real left-wing party in Poland for many, many years. Now, a day before I I entered the train to come here. I read Gazeta Wyborcza local edition in Poznań, where I met a local branch of Razem, and there was an article about the local leader of the post-communist party who just decided to share with the world his opinions about migrants, including his belief that migrants are bringing parasites to Poland, and his full scale of reproduction of Islamophobic cliches that are vibrant in Polish political debate, and that he obviously thought to be a good idea to capitalize on. Now that's just one example of what we have had on Polish political scene under the name left wing. The post-communist party was a rather conservative party, and definitely no liberal party in terms, if you compare it even with Blairites, you would see that the policies that they supported were far to the right, to Pete Mandelson. They were in favor of introducing flat rate income tax. They liberalized labor law and paved the way for the world of labor, where civil contracts, zero-hour contracts, to translate it into British context, became a norm for young generation of workers. And actually, they followed the policies that one would rather declare conservative liberal rather than progressive or social democratic. The only reason and the only anchor that kept them on the left wing of the political scene was their history. They originated from the former Communist Party, and during the transformation, simply joined the process, filling the gap on the left wing of the scene, but without much understanding of even mild social democratic positions, not to mention any further left-wing critical attitudes to what neoliberalism is or was in the 1990s. So actually what we've had for many years was a political scene where the former left was obviously not standing for progressive values, was not standing for workers' rights, was not fighting for a more egalitarian and more democratic society, but rather was just a part of establishment in a way that is unfortunately similar to what happened to many social democratic parties in many countries of Europe over the last 2 decades, but to an extreme. So that's the reason why we chose to start building the left-wing proposal from Poland, for Poland from ground up. For years, academic left or different circles of new left in Poland circulated around academia, and they were often given this Faustian choice of either agreeing to their non-political status or entering the post-communist party and try to intervene and push it leftwards. None of those strategies really worked. So Razem is an ongoing attempt to build a left wing in Poland in another way. We started to construct a party from ground up, trying to make it really democratic. So we gave up one-person leadership, and we have executive committees on all levels, so that we don't concentrate power in the hand of one person. We are rather strict on having gender parity and having regional quotas, so that the party is not dominated by group of middle-class adult gentlemen living in the capital, but rather represents wider strata of Polish society. We openly declared that we are building a movement that stands for workers' rights and that sees itself as a political representation of labor, and not, as it's often quite popular in Polish political on Polish political scene a party that counters the interests of all social groups. And we see it's really nice to be invited here as a representative of a party that did not cross the electoral threshold of 5% that allows to have members of parliament in Poland. However surprising within that sense, we see our electoral result of last autumn. As a first but positive step, we did not cross the 5% threshold, but we gained the visibility and got our message via media to millions of votes. We even convinced 500,000 to vote on Razem's lists. And the task we have over next months, over the next 3 years before next elections, is to convince those voters that they did not really lose their vote, and convince those who did not vote Razem that there is really a chance and hope to construct a political movement that stands for their interests as workers. Now, this means that probably the biggest task for us is to break through the barrier of lack of hope, because when you ask an average voter in Poland whether he believes that his vote makes any change, that electoral program that he supports would be realized in practice, 9 out of 10 would say no chance, I just choose a minor evil. And that's what people got quite accustomed in Poland, and I think not only in Poland. I think it's a wider phenomenon, and it's of course a consequence of the huge pressure of neoliberalism, of globalization on governments that even if they wanted to follow their electoral promises, were often unable to do so, and most recent example being Greece, obviously. But the extent of depoliticization of political life in Poland, the extent to which political life was perceived rather as a managing of state, not choosing a way to go, I think is rather incomparable to most Western democracies. So the task we see before Razem is mostly convincing people that political choices can really change the life of those who vote and who engage in political activism. And that's the other part of the story. The consequence of having a political scene that was so detached from social interests in the long run was the atrophy of political activism. Now, if you look at the membership of political parties in Poland, you would see, for instance, that the former governing party, the Liberals, after 8 years of being in power, have only 7,000 members all over Poland. Now, that's not only because they got delegitimized or compromised, that's just a fact of life in Polish political parties. The level of participation is next to none, and the best example being a governing party having just a few thousand active members. Now, the reason for that is that people perceive political parties as just entry points for those who want to have a career in politics, and not much more. Also a network of more or less shady business interest, of course, but people no longer perceive political activism in Poland as a way of expressing their beliefs and as a way of collectively changing the reality around them. So what we try to revive in Razem is this culture of political activism that is centered around common ideas and not personal interest. That is aimed at small goals that just step by step change the world, but at the same time as trying not to lose the further perspective. Now, this is the old dynamics of traditional social democratic parties, like in all of Palmer's times. They were highly pragmatic in terms of political choices they were making, and this evolutionary step-by-step approach of transforming institutions. But they never forgot the horizon of democratic socialism. And they never forgot that the reason why they transform those institutions is because they want a society that is way more democratic, way more egalitarian than the one they lived in and administer over. I think that the phenomenon of losing this perspective is much wider than Central and Eastern Europe, and I think this illness is something that happened to many social democratic parties in the Western world. And a good thing and a good part of the tale is that the new left movements that popped out after last economic crisis, like ranging from Podemos to Združena Levica in Slovenia, seem to revive that approach, and we see ourselves as a part of this wider anti-austerity mobilization. Of course, anti-austerity in terms of Central and Eastern Europe, where you're out of the Eurozone and you face completely different stage after capitalist development is completely different. But this perspective of marrying small steps with an ambition to democratize society way further than just to guarantee formal democracy is something that I think we share with the movements I've mentioned. And the good news is, I think, and that's surprising, that there are way more people who share those ideas than we initially expected them to show up. And I think, again, that's something that this surprise is something that we share with many mobilizations in the Western world. I would bet my very own bicycle that Bernie Sanders did not expect his campaign to get that scale when he started it. I would also bet many things that 5 or 6 years ago, people on the left wing of the Labour Party would treat a person claiming that Corbyn would become a leader of Labour as a complete loony. Yeah, so we see that the mobilizations both within traditional political structures like Democratic Party in the United States or Labour Party here, or outside of those both structures like Podemos or like different smaller mobilizations in countries Central and Eastern Europe, show up at the surprising scale. While this scale might not be impressive when you look at it from Western European perspective. Razem at the moment is maybe 3,000 active members and another 3,000 sympathizers, because we have two statuses in parties. So there are people who declare that would be active members and those who just want to support the party. So while that might definitely sound like, oh, that's not bigger than an average trot here in Britain, and from our perspective, from the perspective of the country where this social enemy became a norm and political activism and total exception, that's huge. So, and the fact that with those small resources, Razem managed to break through the barrier of visibility and to enter public debate on a small but still visible scale shows that not much is needed in countries where political activism is restricted to social elites. because this is probably the worst thing that we need to we need to fight at the moment. The fact that this small social stratum of people who are politically active in Poland is also obviously middle class and upper class Polish society. Now, and this again is something that traditional left-wing parties all over Europe, I believe, lost over the last decades. An ability to politically mobilize working classes not only as voters, but as activists. And this is particularly strongly visible in Poland, I think, because the circle of those who were politically active also on the left is surprisingly similar in terms of social spheres they come from, with 19th century intelligentsia interested in political activism. So that problem is huge because there is just one party in Poland, I think, or one movement in Poland that really managed to mobilize among those who are dispossessed, and this is unfortunately far right. And this is highly visible in Poland, where this depoliticized political scene produced a vacuum that far right uses at the moment. And the interest of those who are simple workers were obviously not represented and even not declared important in public debates for years and years. So the effect is that this lack of interest, in particular the lack of interest from the liberal parties and from what evolved from mainstream of solidarity into a liberal camp, produced a quite huge social group that had no political representation, and right-wing used it. And when you look at the March of Independence, that's every year's political mobilization of far right in Poland, that now brings tens of thousands on streets, you would see the people who obviously come from those industrialized communities who bought this far-right propaganda simply because there was no other language and no other symbolics that they could use to claim their anger and to claim their right to have their social group visible and noticed by political life. And I think this story also repeats itself in many countries. So those deindustrialized communities and traditional workers become a field, a social field where far right is not only active but sometimes more efficient than traditional left-wing parties that sailed to the center and believed that now we live in an economy of services and they should cater to the city of London and new middle classes and forget about those remnants of the past that used their hands to work. So I think this is also a huge reason why we now have problems with the stability of democratic institutions in Poland. Now, for years and years, those who constructed Polish democracy after 1989 believed that the institutions enjoy mass popular support. And it seems that what we had was rather a passive acquiescence, consent. And this consent gradually breaks down. This consent gradually breaks down because a part of the reason why it survived so long was a belief that we're now waiting for good times to come. So I can live with the fact that I'm unemployed while my kids would have it better. Now, the reality that seems rather possible is that the kids would not have it better. And therefore, what stabilized Polish democracy, I think, in the long term, no longer stabilizes it. And that's also one of the reasons why it was so easy for the right-wing authoritarians, for social conservatives to cater to the working class audience and to take it over. And the problem is, of course, that when you listen to the leaders of the liberal opposition, when you try to understand how they perceive the situation, what happened last year when the liberal establishment lost power into the hands of Kaczynski and Law and Justice, you would mostly see people who don't really think that anything big happened or that anything big changed. Many of them still believe that you can simply turn back time. You can bring back the happy 90s, where the promise of liberal modernization would bring all people behind the liberal democracy of Poland, to cut the long story short. And they see, at least that's how I perceive it, the phenomenon of support for the right-wing authoritarians in Poland as a part of their long-time problem of having a small group of those who lost on the transformation voting for populists, evil populists who undermine the tenets of the good Polish liberal democracy. Now, what I think they do not see is how the group grew up and how much bigger it is at the moment. And in a way, what we see in Poland at the moment, at least how we understand it, is a symptom. It's a symptom of having a model of modernization that did not include huge parts of the population and did not include them structurally. So now they bite back. And the problem is that there was no left-wing voice for years and years. There was no left-wing voice to represent those interests. So they used the only language possible and the only ideas that were available on the market, that being national authoritarian. I don't think that's... there is this quite popular popular interpretation of the situation, especially among older generation of Gazeta Wyborcza founders, saying that I don't mean Jacek Żakowski, I mean the others. That there is this residuum of nationalism in Poland, and it is and always was strong, and what we see now is just an explosion of this residuum, but it's having nothing to do with anything else than, I know, the fact that half of Polish are nationalist, according to this narrative. I don't think this interpretation makes sense. I think that if you look at the group that voted national conservatives, that support now different streams of right-wing authoritarianism in Poland, you would see that three contingents among those voters. One of them are conservatives, conservative Catholics, and the groupings that stood behind the currently governing party for years and years. But there is another group, an obvious one, that's the fluctuating group of voters who were simply so sick of the former establishment party that they wanted to show them the red card. And this is probably the group that was responsible for the scale of electoral success of Law and Justice. But I think that many still do not say how important was the third block. Voters who expected a social turn. Voters who were fed up with the state that promised to build a Poland that resembles Western European welfare states, and that actually did not make a step toward this direction. Voters that were fed up with the situation where having a stable job means either getting connections or moving to London. Voters who were fed up with the lack of council houses and the fact that what remained of council houses in Poland was systematically privatized. Voters who were fed up of hearing that you should not expect any help from state, and if you expect any help from state when you're in dire strait, then means that you're Homo Sovieticus, that you don't fit the new democratic Poland because you want something from the state. This is quite a big group that for years and years did not have any representation on Polish political scene, and that was quite surprising, because if you would look into opinion polls, you would see that the support for this traditional welfare state, social democratic economic policy would be a dominant group among Poles. But at the same time, especially in the 90s, but also way into the next decade, you would not see the representation of those views on the political scene, or if you would see it, it would be weak or marginalized or demonized. When it happens that the peasants' leader Leper crossed the threshold, managed to enter the parliament, he was put into the corner of Homo Sovieticus, unable to integrate into Polish liberal democracy and not fit, not worth it, at the same moment, even before he managed to mutter one word in parliament. So this exclusion of pro-social democratic views from Polish political debate was a long-term phenomenon, and I think that this group, at least parts of this group, started to identify themselves with the promises that Law and Justice has been making for quite a long time. Now, it's not as if they just started to implement those changes in family policies after the elections. It was like 3 or 4 years when their propaganda started to center around the promise of social turn. And I must say that from the position of independent left, we are always making laugh of that, because we remember the previous time when Law and Justice governed, and we remembered how they used their social program to win the election. But after they did, they employed Zita Gilowska as a Minister of Finances. So they continued the neoliberal policies that they inherited. Now, 3 minutes. Okay, I definitely talk too much. So it's a good thing to know that I should come to the end. So what's different at the moment is that I think that right-wing nationalists, that right-wing conservatives, understand that this is the key to keep power. This is the key to keep power, to present themselves as an only political force that is realistically able to implement any social turn in Polish in social policy, and it's the only force that can implement any progressive development of the welfare state. So the reason for that being, of course, again and again, there was no social left in Polish parliament for years. And the reason for that being also that the independent left that functioned not as political parties, but as groupings, as a social organization, didn't manage to convince those groups that it is a viable political representation of those views. So, to cut the long story short, that's the most important task we see now for Razem, to convince people who are in favor of social turn, but who uphold the policy of restricting women's rights, who are abhorred by the fact that the government collaborates with far-right nationalists and invites them to official celebrations, who are abhorred with the idea of having an abortion law like in Salvador in Poland, like it's promoted by Law and Justice at the moment, to convince them that we are the third option, that there is a possibility to have politics that is both social and democratic, that is in favor of expanding welfare states, and is in favor of having a state that is responsible for a range of spheres where it gave up responsibility over the last 2 decades, ranging from housing and ending at guaranteeing an elementary social security, to convince those people that this can be done within the framework of democratic institutions, and that the story that Law and Justice now tries to sell, that it needs to demolish and destruct the rule of law in order to be able to implement those changes, is untrue. And here we come to the wider problem, that is that we have a problem with a restricted democracy, not only on the level of national states and not only in the countries where authoritarians get power, but we have problem of an ability to implement those policies and to have a democratic say for the societies all over Europe. And that is to much extent a problem of having European institutions not exactly democratic in the moment, and not exactly happy about states trying to implement social turns in their social policies, or trying to implement traditional social democratic policies while they govern. But unfortunately, I had 3 minutes here, so that's exactly the moment where I should stop.
He can't tackle the European Union, so he has to stop. Jacek, so here we have the third option, a voice for working people, and one that can work within democracy. Over to you to open up our discussion.
Well, the problem with third option in Poland now is that there is a kind of polarization that is going deeper and deeper, and it's organized around democracy, rule of law, and European identity of the country. So on one side we have those who are in power now, ruling party, Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, which is authoritarian, which is Eurosceptic or Western sceptical, and which is social. It's very strongly social. I mean, in their rhetorics, they say we must take this and this and this from the state. We deserve it. They don't say, as classical Polish elites used to say, Poles deserve it, or you deserve it, or we give you. No, we take because we deserve it. They are us. Apart from the classical, from the PO and Nowoczesna and all the political establishment, which is saying we'll provide you with. That's the difference. And on the other side, there is a big social movement, perhaps the biggest social movement in Poland since Solidarity, since early 80s, organized to defend democracy and the rule of law. And this polarization organizes social conflict and political debate in Poland entirely. I would say it was much easier to establish left or progressive party like 2 years ago in Poland. Now it's much more difficult because right is extremely so-called right. Traditionalists, those authoritarian traditionalists are very socially oriented. They gave a lot of promises and they, step by step, fulfill it. I mean, it's impossible to fulfill all these promises, at least not in a short time. But what they are saying is, we give you we take for us as much as it's possible. There are some apples, we will take it, and we will wait until other apples will appear. And people feel it. They get 500 zlotys. I mean, that's not about money. That's about control. To whom belongs reality? Not only the state, but reality. They bring back the reality under control of the society. And that's why they are growing in polls. Now there's a poll showing they have like 40%. I mean, there will be tougher time, of course, and so on. But this is the problem. And so the party like Razem, or the progressive agenda, is pro-democratic, so it's on one side, this side defending democracy, and it's on the other side defending society versus elite and versus rich and so on and so on. This is a big difference between first term of peace in power on the beginning of 2000 years and peace now. Then they were belonging to the Tina mainstream economically, implementing neoliberal solutions like cutting taxes and so on and so on. Now they don't make this mistake. And they have a strong support from international environment. People like Varoufakis are much more radical economically than peace. So nowadays they can bring, I believe, 5, 4, 6, 7 Nobel Prize winner in economic sciences to take support for the economic agenda. This is absolutely different situation. And so what the left was the situation of the only left party existing, in fact, in Poland. I mean, there is a small communist party as well, but this is not important. Razem is the only hope for Polish left, I believe, in coming years. Well, the way one should promote the progressive agenda is the famous saying that there is no other democracy than social democracy. I mean, that democracy is not about institutions. I mean, institutions are important, and that's what Kaczynski said like a week ago, that institutions are important, but they have nothing to do with democracy, in fact. But remind that democracy is about equality and what it means now. What is equality these days. We measure equality with Gini coefficient, and the establishment used to say, well, Polish Gini doesn't grow, it even decreases slowly, so we are safe. But it's not about Gini. It's about certainty. It's about what you expect, or what you can get for your money. And this is a mistake peace does, because peace gives money to people. But at the same time, social services are still very strongly connected with a much bigger money. I mean, housing, public healthcare, which doesn't work well enough, and if you want to go to doctor effectively and to use healthcare effectively, you must pay a lot of money, much more than middle class can afford now. This education. So they give 500 zlotys to people. People can spend it on daily needs, but it doesn't change the uncertainty that's still present in their life, fundamental uncertainty. The so-called trash jobs. I mean, this is also civil contracts. This is really a change in situation of employee who is not anymore employee, and so on and so on. So, if the left is looking for its space in this polarized situation, it must speak not about money, but about equality, not of chances, but of lives. This is very difficult in a country like Poland. We joined the Western community in times when so-called European values, this social democratic consensus that existed since war till mid-70s or the beginning of 80s, has been broken. We joined the West in the time when I remember, I'm still impressed, Ralph Dahrendorf came to Poland in 1992, I believe, and he said, the West you were dreaming to join has disappeared. Western values, I mean this social democratic consensus, welfare state and so on, is disappearing, and Asian values appear in our world now. What he meant? He meant authoritarian, solidaristic system that peace is creating now in Poland. So they just follow the prediction of Ralph Dahrendorf, late Ralph Dahrendorf. The problem of the left is also, or progressive agenda or whatever, is also the relation with this pro-democratic movement, because it's been created by establishment, and it's a kind. I mean, there are of course the different streams in this movement, but the major stream in this movement, this is a self-defense of the middle class that's been created during transition, these transitional elites, that Kaczynski intends to change personally. What he said is, we must create a new elite. We will skip this all this all these authorities and all this middle class, and we'll create a new one. This is a social revolution. This is a social revolution that touches not hundreds of people. That's not a change like after elections that you change some officials. It touches hundreds of thousands of people because they fire people in every state-dependent, not only state institution, but also state-dependent institution, that fire people, old people, and take new people. It's like after 1945. So they create constant revolutionary elite. The new left, there are people coming from groups that are should I stop? Okay. Kick me.
I will.
And those people come from out of this elite, and they should be supporters for progressive agenda because they support interests of weaker. Those far-right people are definitely socially weaker. I mean, if not economically, because sometimes there are some researches showing that the core of support for far-right is not. They are not very poor people. They have some businesses, usually small businesses. It's like Iranian bazaar, something like that, small business and so on. But they are weak. You must understand that in the growing capitalism, weak people are not only those who are unemployed or so on, but also those who try to establish their own businesses and are exploited by big companies, by corrupted officials, by the entire system, and work usually 12, 13, 14 hours a day and have almost nothing. That was Samoobrona. Mostly small businesses from rural areas, small cities, small towns, and so on. So the problem is how to create an environment in which people will feel they have a chance to get more certainty and feel full-range citizens with not only in this symbolic sphere, like we are proud because we are Poles, and Poland, is fantastic. This is the source of pride, but the source of pride may be different. We are proud because we changed the society and made it modern. Not modern in the way that excluded us before, but modern in a way that included us now, or offers us a different way of inclusion, not nationalistic. This is very difficult. This is too sophisticated. And I think since we have our progressive agenda has now much more influential powers against than it used to, because now you have public media against, now you have big money which follows the government against, and now we have the church, which is encouraged to be even more conservative, even to be polemic to the Pope, Polish Church, as an institution is polemic to the Pope. First time in the history. So, to stop in this moment, I would say this is perhaps the worst moment to establish a strong left party in Poland. But we have no other moment now.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'm fascinated by the way that Jacek is talking about the need for more certainty and the need for different and new forms of pride, really up against the odds. And in the way that Adrian was talking about activism, not just voters. There seems to me to be a different concept of social change, and we now have a chance to investigate that.